Thank you for listening to The Lawyer's Daughter. This is Jen Carroll, and this podcast does not have any video. I know I'm on YouTube, but that doesn't matter. I really appreciate you listening to the podcast here. Let's go get started. Oh my goodness. Today's podcast, it's August 19th, Monday, and the convention started today. And my podcast is late because I had to work. I know it's a thing. I have to do this thing, work. I only have 2 more weeks of it. So I had to work, and I also had to go to the orthodontist, which I discovered this cool new thing called braces wax, which for Invisalign is a dream. And I'm so happy now. So let's get on with the podcast because this is really important. And today, while the convention is opening, and I realize some of you don't care because this is not your party. If you want to watch a convention for the sake of watching a convention, it's not bad. And here's what you're going to watch for, because today we're going to talk about symbolism. We're going to talk about 2 things, actually. We're going to talk about the convention symbolism, and I love the red, white, and blue and all the balloons and all that. But we'll also talk a little bit about the delegate experience, too, because I wanted to just quickly know what a day is like in the day of a delegate. So I read a Republican one and a Democratic one, and put together a little bit about what I could learn about the day. So first of all, it's the DNC is kicking off in Chicago right now. In about half an hour, it's going to be the evening keynotes. And the evening keynotes usually are around 5 o'clock, which is 8 o'clock on the East Coast. Sorry, that's rough. But that's why they try to do it, so they can bridge all of us out here in the early dinner time and those of you that are doing this during prime time. Everything that we see at this convention is going to set the tone for the Democratic Party, just like we had the same experience last month the month before for the Republican convention. So first, a really quick little update on what delegates go through. I've been watching people on Twitter land at the airport. Some people couldn't get flights out because of bad weather. Going on forever. But essentially the way this works is it's a mix of business and celebration. And while a delegate and everybody there is like caught up all the time, I hope they all don't get COVID, but they're all just running around like a super fun first day of a trade show or whatever, where you just want to take everything in. For both Democrat and Republican delegates, the day typically starts with early breakfast meetings. And this is when they get their daily credentials, briefings from the party leaders, and chances to connect with other delegates. A lot of pictures on Twitter this morning of people meeting each other and different folks running around and saying hi to the different state delegate meetings. So those clearly the state delegates were all meeting. Remember, in some states like California, you might never meet your fellow delegates because our state is so massive. Same like in Texas. We've got big country to cover. So these coming together at the state level is really cool. And that's the first thing to do on the Monday morning. After breakfast, they will deal into more formal business. They're also going to talk about some of these platform issues, the different planks in the platform. That's got to get worked out, and they've got to find out where we have schisms, where there's a problem. Then they move to lunchtime, which is typically sponsored events with key speakers or entertainment. So it's one of those, big food, trade show food, whatever, event food, but also an opportunity for networking. And then in the afternoon, they get some time off, probably before this 8 o'clock. They get this afternoon off where they can go sightseeing, relax. The little bit of the boondoggle part of this, which is nice. Everybody deserves a boondoggle. I'm very pro boondoggle. You go on a business trip, you include that weekend. Damn it, you deserve a boondoggle, or go in early. Otherwise, I would never have seen the world if I hadn't done my life that way. Anyway, these guys get to go out and have a little bit of sightseeing, fun, and relaxation, and then socialize a bit more before the evening's main events. And as the sun sets, the convention floor comes alive with prime time speeches, and that's what you want to think of it about, prime time speeches, which will start here in a few minutes. Delegates are there to show their support, cheer for their candidate, and be a part of history. And then, of course, as you might expect, the night continues on with after parties. And as I have aged, the after parties become more and more ass-kicking parties. I don't know how people do it. I think the oldest delegate in the Democratic Party I think she's 92 years old, and she is there. I saw the picture of her, and she said, because I'm going to show that I support the party. What a badass old lady. Love it. Okay, so, and then, after parties, the after parties are the ones where you end up back at the hotel and you talk in the lobby or at the bar or in someone's room, and you have these really deep discussions, and then somebody looks at their watch and goes, oh my God, we have to be up in 5 hours, and everybody kind of cries and goes, it's just for this week. We can do it. Ha ha ha. Yeah, we'll find out. At the core of these activities, there are a few differences. At the Democratic conventions, they tend to have a more diverse group of delegates, so there's a wider range of events. Republican conventions, while diverse, tend to focus more on traditional conservative values, and the activities correspond accordingly. I don't know what that means. Do conservatives play cornhole? I don't know what conservative activities would be, but I've read the newspapers and I've seen people got arrested for it. So I'm just going to say, I think we better not name things as being conservative and Democrat in terms of values, because that's just not going to be a road anybody wants to go down. All right, so that's what's happening for the delegates. Get up and go. When we look at day one, we really notice that the convention's setting the tone. And that's, and this, for the Democratic convention, this thing's happening so fast, the tone's kind of set. Like, we're coming in hot because we've got 100 days to do this. So the tone is very go get 'em. At the tone for the Republic one, I cut off my own words there. I don't know why. At the tone for the Republican one, it's a much more heavy-handed leadership focus, kind of a top-down way of governing. So there's where you're going to see the tone. There's an example in 1984 when Mario Cuomo got up and talked about the tale of two cities at the Democratic National Convention that was really contrasting Reagan's Morning in America content. And while the speech is good, and I have links in here for all this stuff, you can go see them. The speech wasn't just words. It really did symbolize the party's stance on economic inequality. And that would be the tale of two cities, right? The contrast. Because if you go look at the Morning in America commercial, and I did not put it in here. I almost did. But if you go look at the Morning in America commercial, it's 1984 when Reagan was rerunning. That was his second run. It is very, very the cleavers. It's Leave It to Beaver. It's white. It's very white, and it's very conventional. Mom, dad, two kids, that kind of thing. So that I could see why Cuomo's Tale of Two Cities would be very different, because one is kind of the perfect, iconic 1950s mom, dad, and the kids. And the rest is everything else, all the rest of us who aren't fitting into the stereotype. So that was why the speech was so important. There will also be symbols that shape the narrative. So conventions are filthy with symbolism, from the colors to the imagery to even how they're using the symbols to evoke emotions or convey unity. That is some of the fun part to watch for when you're looking at how the convention is being run. Are you seeing other people? Are we getting wide shots? Are we seeing close shots? How are they using symbols? One of Trump's things is he likes to use gold in addition to red, white, and blue. That's just part of his brand. So he uses some of his brand assets. That makes a lot of sense. It totally makes sense to include that in part of his party's symbology and visual symbology. There was a symbol, one of the symbols that was not a thing but an act, was the big hug between Hillary and Barack on the 2008 Democratic National Convention. That was a big deal, Hillary endorsing Barack in that way. And it really symbolized party unity. And that was imperative at that time in 2008. Remember, we had a housing crisis. Everything was upside down. We'd just come out of 8 years of Bush and 9/11. I mean, there was a lot that happened prior to Barack Obama arriving. So seeing that the old school was welcoming the new school, kind of Joe Biden and Hillary and Kamala, is similar, kind of that passing of the baton. You'll also see there's a visual language that can play a critical role. And in that same convention in 2008, Barack Obama's team decided to move the acceptance speech specifically to Denver's Invesco Field in an open-air football stadium, but they also added some classic columns and really tried to work up this idea of the campaign's themes of change and hope, and showcasing him as an artifact in that diorama, if you think about it, just how you imagine that whole stage. Again, I have links in here if you want to look at in the blog. Always have links. And then finally, there's conventions can draw on history to create that symbology. And I apologize, these all being Democratic references because they happen in the other ones, but I would say probably the Democrats work a little more on this aspirational stuff. So it's probably why I was having so much more luck finding good examples. But in 1988, Jesse Jackson, our Rainbow Coalition man, who I just heard was just on the stage in Chicago about 10 minutes ago, he came up and talked at the 1988 Democratic National Convention, and that's when he really took on civil rights, the civil rights movement and the struggles of African Americans, and he talked about the Rainbow Coalition, and it was really a good speech. I have a little special spot for Jesse Jackson because my mom met him in the elevator at the state attorney general's office in Sacramento. She used to work there on initiatives when the voters want to try to change the law by grassroots. You have these things called initiatives, and that's where my mom worked. She was in the initiatives division, but Jessie, she said she went to get on the elevator. She walked in and she goes, all of a sudden, she goes, I'm always looking down. That was my mom, typical 50s woman, always looking down. She goes, I look down, I go, she said, all of a sudden I go, she goes, I think this guy's really tall. And I start to look at that, and I'm standing facing nose to nose with Jesse Jackson. Well, like she's very short, so not really nose to nose, but there he was in the elevator. She thought it was great. He talked to her. It was wonderful. So, okay, there. That's just random life. 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon is what that is. So what should you be looking for as the convention unfolds? Certain moments are going to stand out, but it's kind of fun to say, you know what, this might be one of those memories. This might be one of those things Jen babbles about because this is a big deal. It happened when Ann Richards of Texas, shout out to Texas, had an iconic keynote at the 1988 Democrat National Convention. And there she used her sharp wit and critique of the Republican Party. And, she did it like a Texan. And I do miss Ann Richards. And Go Texas, the video for her speech, I clipped it ahead to when you really should start watching it. And so that's in the blog as well. And then, of course, conventions can surprise. And we've already talked about Ted Cruz's refusal to endorse Donald Trump. And I suspect nobody really believed that was going to happen until it happened. They've since made up and whatever. I don't even know where we are now with Ted Cruz and Trump, but I do know that there can be surprises. So always keep your eyes peeled. And then when it comes to just this week, you should know that there are prominent Republicans that plan to come speak at the Democratic Convention. That's going to be interesting. That's different. Their participation underscores the Democrats' campaign to build a broader coalition by appealing to disillusioned Republicans. And I think actually disillusion is probably a strong word. It's more like people who just remember how it used to be and that we just used to argue. It was so simple. It just wasn't all this name calling and awful. I sound like such an old lady when I say that, but it just didn't used to be this bad. And if it was happening not in front of all of us. So, I mean, let's just say they just at least managed the brand impression in the older days. So I think it's good. I think it's getting good to get back to a very participatory, open democracy where people can be heard and their ideas can be explored. And not all ideas are going to make it to the top of the list, but you have to start somewhere. You just have to start somewhere. So I'm telling you, your homework for this week, by the way, is to figure out what it is that is very important to you. I'm not talking about issues and everything else. I just mean in the world. What are the 10 most things that are most important to you? And they can be both real things and they can be both tangibles and intangibles. So like for me, an intangible is it is so important to me that I can control my time. It's just turned out to be the most important thing in my world is being able to control my own time. So I work when I can, usually it's based on my brain, but I work when my brain works. And I do podcasting when my other brain works because that's a different kind of thing. I can have music on when I'm writing my blogs and stuff. It's just a different jam. That's like one of my most important things. That ability to have, I guess it's fundamentally liberty to do the things that I need to do when I think I'm best at doing them. That's a high one for me. So that's your homework. Think about that. And in the meantime, the convention's going to keep moving on. You're going to watch this. We're going to see some issues around ceasefire in Gaza. We're going to see some people who are advocating for abortion rights, which is, we're with you. And then there's some economic justice protesters that are rumored to be attending. The demonstration that was supposed to happen this morning that was supposed to have 20,000 people did not. Not really sure what happened, but only about 10% of what they were forecasting showed up. We'll see. There'll probably be other hijinks, people trying to steal microphones and stuff during the event, but we'll watch that. There was some of those hijinks yesterday, late afternoon, but it was a non-event. I mean, the security moved right in and was easy. So I hope it stays like that so that we can focus on the stuff we need to focus on, which is listening to what it is we're going to do with this country of ours and how we're going to keep it going, rolling forward in all the best possible ways. With that, I encourage you to enjoy what's going on this evening. You'll listen to this way after that, so I'm coming up from behind. But I still am hoping that you will enjoy watching some political television. And whether you are pro or against, let's talk about it. Let's figure it out. Let's stay involved. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. Thank you for listening to today's podcast. Make sure you subscribe and rate, and I'll be back with another episode really soon.